we'll, when we're ready, we start in color.
You have to start preview.
We'll start preview.
Mm-hmm.
We're not ready to do that yet, are we?
Yeah, go ahead
Oh,
and
yeah,
start.
we are.
Okay. And then I like to do it 10, 15, 20 minutes beforehand just to make sure everything's working.
Right.
Because that start streaming is going to turn dark blue whenever it's ready.
Okay.
And then we'll be streaming out there. Right now, the people will be seeing the countdown meter. Countdown clock. There you go.
All right, so we're ready to start streaming.
Yes, sir.
Do we need to sync?
Up at the top, click OK. You
I
did
didn't
it,
see
brother.
that.
And I can go watch it on the view on watch page.
Okay. See, I made the audio live, didn't I? So we're going out. Okay, that's fine.
But you can turn it off.
Hmm?
Go back and turn it off.
And the audio right here.
Uh-huh.
Blog Talk Radio.
Minus 30 seconds and counting. You know, this used to be a hell of a good country. Can you understand what's going on? Chaos, man. Chaos. T-minus 15. Oh, they're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent. 10, 9, ignition sequence start. What you represent to them is freedom. We have ignition. Engines are running. We have liftoff. We have liftoff.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Chaos Radio number 176. This is WBTM Internet Radio coming to you live from downtown Arlington, Texas.
There you go again.
I know.
We're not downtown.
I know we're not downtown, but hey, look, we're close enough. Anyway, hey, you guys, this morning we got a interview this morning with Ken Cope, and he is running for the United States Senate, Texas. And Ken, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning.
Well, you're certainly welcome. And you know, actually, when I heard from your, I guess your scheduler the other day.
Yes.
And then I was talking, I thought, well, we haven't had that gentleman on the show, and we need to get him here. And matter of fact, you came into studio, which is really great, and we appreciate it.
Oh, this is great. I love coming to the studio and sharing coffee with you guys and having a chance to explain to Texans and all your listeners around the world as to just who I really am, because I'm not a politician, so that ought to be refreshing to you.
Okay, and you know, would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about your campaign and you know, you've got
absolutely
all the time you want.
Man, I'm going to take every second you give me. Go. Well, first of all, you just heard me say I'm not a politician. I've never been in politics. I've just been like everyone else. I've been paying my taxes and obeying the law and raising a family and having a career and enjoying life the way you're supposed to. But I am at the age of 18, I went into the military as a private. I came out 27 years later as a lieutenant colonel from the United States Army. While I was completing part of that as reserves, I went to work for a global aerospace manufacturing company, Mel, that you and I both know so dearly.
Oh, yeah.
As a cost control specialist. And then 28 years later, I retired as a business development executive. And I had a reputation for being a problem solver and a successful problem solver, I might say. Mm-hmm. So I was deeply involved in the international contracting for that particular company and developing billion-dollar contracts and bringing business back into North Texas, actually, as well. So I retired from them, and I'm a Christian. I'm a pro-life guy. I'm a social and fiscal conservative. I'm a capitalist, and we've had several discussions here this morning before we went on the air talking about capitalism and the importance of it. And a longtime defender of the Constitution. And I'd say that I am the only solution-based candidate that you'll find in this race, and that includes even the incumbent. And when you look out at my website at copetexas.com, you'll see a tab there that says solutions on it. Mm-hmm. And what I have done, because I have not been in politics, is I look at what the issues are, the things that have concerned me and are concerning me, and I developed some solutions that I believe are logically based and sellable to the American people and to Texans in particular, and that's what you'll find out there. So I have solutions ranging from the Obamacare disaster that we're all saddled with, through the statism activities that are ongoing with the economy, the overreach of the federal government. I have what's called the 503 IRS elimination plan. You can see what that one is. We can talk about that if you'd like. I've got an immigration four-step plan that is being released officially today with a public release. And I've also signed a contract with Texas, because with most politicians, if their lips are moving, you think that they're lying. And I realize that. So since I'm not a politician, my lips are moving and you can trust me. So that's kind of the way I've looked at this thing. But I do understand that people want to see something in writing as to what's your commitment. So I've taken a contract with Texas. I've signed a term limit issue because I'm also deeply involved in the local Tea Party issues. But I signed a 2-term limit as a United States Senator. Under no cases would I stay beyond 2 terms. I've taken one on the national debt that I would not increase the national debt, and I would have to say with one exclusion, that's in time of war. I mean, we have to make sure we have a consideration for that. I've also taken a commitment that I will not, pardon me, I will not allow the campaign finance money to flow into the coffers for the 4.5 years of the first term, actually of any term, 4.5 years. The gates would be closed, where the incumbent has raised $10 million in the last 6 years when he was running against nobody, just to build up a great big hammer so he can club people like me around.
Oh, yeah, we're familiar with that.
And so I've taken a commitment to say we need to level the field. So, you know, when I like to say, and I want Texans and listeners to all understand that there still are people of integrity and principle willing to come forward and serve. The reason I'm serving is because I recognize that if we don't have someone that'll stand up and fight for our country today, there will not be a country for our children and grandchildren to be fighting for tomorrow. The question that has lingered in my mind, and I know that I'm going to get, I have 5 grandchildren. I have 4 grandsons and 1 grand princess, and very special, these grandchildren. And I look at them, and the question that I fear the most is, Grandpa, why didn't you do something to save this country? And after this election is over, I'm not going to have to worry about that question because I am standing up. I've gotten out of my seat in the sofa, and I've come forward to say, you people want new voices, you want new experience, you want logical thinking. I'm coming forward. My name's on the ballot. It's too late for anyone else. You have to make a choice. Are you going to go with an incumbent that's just been a seat-warming senator in this state for the last 12 years, been ineffective in immigration reform, who's lacked leadership, and demonstrated lack of leadership in multiple times, calls himself a conservative but doesn't vote like a conservative? Or are you going to make a choice? You have a choice if you like term limits. You each have 1 vote. This is your opportunity to come forward and use that vote to demonstrate term limits. The incumbent served 2 terms, and it's time for him to move on.
Yes.
And so I'm out there with 7 others. We have Congressman Steve Stockman has joined the race. I have made an official call for him to withdraw from the race because he's become an embarrassment to Republicans, to the state of Texas, and is not a serious candidate. His antics have actually been distractors from us being able to address the real serious issues with our senator.
You know, that's a great statement that you just made because I feel a little bit the same way. And I wonder while we're there, without interrupting you too much, keep your thoughts, but let's talk about that. Why did Steve drop out of the Congress to run for the Senate? Did somebody put him up to this, or what do you think the case is without perhaps guessing?
Well, I would be guessing.
Okay.
I do not know the man.
Me too.
I have never met him. I've only been able to watch through the press as he's been holding up liberal spray for oil and things on guns and barf bags and trying to make that into a serious discussion about becoming a United States Senator. And I don't believe that is what our citizens of Texas deserve or expecting. And unfortunately, the press want to swoon and get all excited about it.
Yeah.
And so that's the big case between John Cornyn and Stockman. Stockman hadn't been president anyway. I put 5,200 miles on my car since the 1st of January covering the state of Texas and going to candidate forums and meeting people and looking eyeball to eyeball with them. And I'll tell you one thing for sure, and that is that the citizens of Texas want a change. They do not want John Cornyn to be the next United States Senator again. And everywhere I've gone, it's ABC. And I started looking what ABC, anybody but Cornyn.
Yeah.
So that means that now you have to make a choice between the 7 other candidates. That's all you have a choice for in this primary election on the 4th of March. And, you know, in my case, people ask me, well, how are you going to compete with the money? I mean, you know, John Cornyn's out there. He's got the slickest ads. Man, they sound so
hey,
good.
Look,
that deep voice, I'm a conservative just like you. Excuse me, he's not a conservative like me, okay? And the citizens of Texas know that. And he's trying to do a flyover at 10,000 feet. But he's not present on the campaign trail. Neither is Mr. Stockman. And everywhere I go, I hear from citizens that have complaints with the incumbent where they can't even get a response out of his office. And, they are frustrated. And he's an absent senator to them. And when we see what happened with Senator Ted Cruz on the floor of the United States Senate, when he was making his activity to defund Obamacare, and by the way, I believe that his tactic was absolutely correct. He was dead on track. We had to be willing to shut down this government because what he was trying to do is bring the other party over to at least to be able to sit down and negotiate.
Yes.
And what we do not have is leadership in the Senate that understands the art of negotiation. And they capitulate. And this is part of my problem with John Cornyn. It's a lack of leadership and a lack of understanding how to negotiate. They capitulate before they ever get to the negotiation table. And they give up everything that they may have as high ground. And you can't negotiate when you're the only one sticking your hand out and trying to shake hands. When the other party doesn't come back across, there's nowhere for you to go. So,
and what sticks into Texan's cross is that he abandoned Ted Cruz.
Not just abandon. I mean, when he had, and by the way, I voted for John Cornyn in the last 2 elections. I mean, in up front and total honesty. And I've had communication with the staff, and I've made it clear that if he was going to vote the way of closure on that particular vote, that I would not support him, and I would do everything in my power to ensure that he is not a third-term senator.
Would you?
I had no idea at that time I was be running for this office.
But. Absolutely. Would you characterize the cloture issue double talk?
Oh, let me explain that
Please.
one just a little bit. I want to go back to the fact that I agreed with the strategy that Ted Cruz had, that we needed to be leveraging the risk of shutting down the government against bringing them to the table. Right. When Senator Cornyn stood up and said, I didn't agree with the tactic. He didn't agree with the tactic of shutting down the government. Okay, I can understand difference in tactics, but then 30 days later, we come up for a national debt discussion, okay? And what does he do? He votes for shutting down the government because of the national debt. So that's called hypocrisy, okay? And it's not leadership. So while he was the number 2 leader in the Senate caucus for the Republican Party, his job was to be a cohesive element within that caucus, to help be able to bring us together with strength to be able to battle against the opposition party, in this case the Democrats. He failed immensely. He was actually the divisive force that caused the fracture split between the Ted Cruz and the Mike Lees and the Rand Pauls and the rest of the establishment. And he was the one who articulated that fracture. So he is a failed leader. Yeah. And we need to understand that. In America, in business, leaders are judged upon results. We don't hold that same standard to politicians, and we should. And if you do that today, that's why I'm coming out with solutions, okay, at CopeTexas.com. When I have a solution out there, I'm telling you this is a benchmark that I'm putting my name on and says this is what you need to hold me, Texas, to a standard of I'm going to either get the job done or I don't. If I don't get the job done when it comes time for re-election, then you just need to throw my butt out. I mean, you are the people that we're working for. And it's something that I will never forget. I wear my suit today because I'm out interviewing with everybody that can vote. I have 3 gentlemen sitting here in the studio tonight, or this morning. They're going to be my future employers. And I'm trying to impress them. I'm trying to impress all you people out there listening to the fact that I understand who I work for. Today, the situation is such, when you follow the money, and I keep going back to this money issue, the $10 million that has come into the Cornyn campaign, where did it come from? It wasn't primarily from within the state of Texas. You can look at online and see it comes from across the country. So you now have outside influences where Senator Cornyn has become very close to the establishment, very close to the big money, okay? The outside money influencers are now starting to determine who's going to become the next senator for the state of Texas. And why is that? Because the money is flooding the airways within the state of Texas with these fancy ads we're talking about. So when someone asks me, I'm not a foolish guy, okay? Why did I get in this race? Because I don't believe that this race is going to be about money. I believe it's about electrons. And you people out there across Texas that are listening to this broadcast, you need to know If you want the elections to be about money, then you just stay at home and don't do anything. If you're tired and upset with what's going on in the election process and how things are being communicated, then it's time for you to rise up. And if you're a Christian, let me make another challenge to you. I hope you're aware that only 25% of Christians across this country come out and vote. And yet we stand around, we talk about our Judeo-Christian values being under attack, primarily in Washington, D.C. Well, what do you expect when you don't stand up and defend yourself? And I'm talking to that other 75% out there. You are responsible for allowing this to happen. And if you don't like that, I'm sorry, but I say what I mean and I mean what I say, and it's time that we call it the way it is. You've got to get up and rise up and make a difference in this election. This election, you do have a choice. You can go with an incumbent that's been there wanting a third term, a career politician, and I like to call them the money changers in the temple. Mm-hmm. Or you can exercise your vote and throw the money changers out of that temple. And if you don't like me, look at the other candidates. I will tell you, though, I am the only one that's got solutions. I hear other candidates, we visit in the other, when we're doing candidate forums and so on, and get a lot of hand waving. It's all about the Constitution. Everything's unconstitutional. Well, we can only point fingers for so long. And if we don't come out with solutions and be willing to talk about solutions and put them in front of you so you have a chance to make a determination whether this candidate can chew bubble gum and walk at the same time, or if you would be comfortable with letting them have your representation, then now is the time to make that choice and that decision. And I'll tell you, out of the remaining, you take the incumbent out, you take Congressman Stockman out of the mix, that leaves 6 of us left. And I only believe that there's probably 3 of those 6 that you'd even be interested in looking at for a vote. So all of a sudden, your choices are becoming very, very few. And like it or not, that's the fact of the case. So Christians across Texas, you need to stand up. You need to unite. You need to be talking about this at your churches and let them know, I'm a Christian candidate. I know the others are also Christian candidates, but you need to be asking yourselves, which person is going to be able to go forward and articulate what you're looking for on the floor of the United States Senate. And I would consider it an honor to be elbow to elbow or back to back with Senator Ted Cruz on the floor of the United States Senate defending the Constitution and our freedoms that we all cherish so much.
Well, I have a question to ask you that pertains to the proof in the pudding. And I always like to bring these up because, as you said a while ago, we can point our fingers at things, we can continue to complain about something, and if we don't have a solution, then really all we're bringing to the table is the identification of the problem. Yes. And that's it. And I've always heard all of my life, all of my teachers, high school, on through college, if you have a complaint, bring a solution with it, and let's talk about it. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is Cornyn's support of Harry Reid when Sharon Angle ran against him a number of years ago. Now, I don't want to throw a trap question in here, and I don't mean it in a negative form. Maybe you're not totally aware of that, but I'd almost bet you are. And so there's some of the proof that we're talking about a guy who does not support Texans.
Well, I love these stump the candidate questions. I
didn't think I would.
And I don't run from these stump the candidate questions. A lot of people say be careful of the poison words that you get trapped in on these things. But absolutely, when we start talking about the establishment and the coziness with the establishment and the big money, then you start understanding the relationship that you just talked about with Senator Reid. And the McCain-Feingold bill was designed to protect the incumbents. That's purely what it's designed for. And in this case, Senator Reid was the incumbent, and he was in danger of losing it. And you can't imagine what the deals are being cut in the cloakroom, on the floor of the Senate in the back. And I just can't imagine it. And that's why I know that I would be considered a threat, because if they don't have the hook of the money tied to me, and that's not what motivates me. What motivates me is thinking that my family or my grandchildren, when this thing would be over, would look at me and say, I'm not proud of my grandfather because he didn't do what he said.
Yeah.
to me, that is the most striking. It's like putting a dagger in my heart. My whole purpose is to be able to come back to Texas and having fulfilled my obligation and commitment, and that Texans know that they have had someone of principle integrity. And when I go meet my maker at that judgment seat, there's only one thing I take with me. It's not cowboy boots, it's not blue jeans, and it's not great big belt buckle. It's my integrity. And I'm not going to allow anything, if I'm so blessed to be your representative to the United States Senate, serving along with Ted Cruz, I am not going to allow anything, and there isn't anything in Washington that's going to tempt me to violate my commitment that I'm making to my employer, the citizens of Texas. It's just not going to happen. Am I headstrong? Am I overly confident? I just know who I am. I mean, I've stayed the course. My wife and I have been married for 39 years. I call her my bride. And I understand commitment. It took me 27 years to stick with the military, to retire as a lieutenant colonel. And I understood what those principles were, and I lived within those frameworks, and I flourished in those. And the same thing with working at Triumph. You know, I had 28 years there. I understand what commitment is, and I understand when you put your name on the line what it means. And I'm not afraid to do it, and that's why I put that contract for Texas out there at copetexas.com. You can read it. And you know, I want to make a comment. I'm looking here at your screen, and I see that Cornyn is the second most conservative senator in 2013. You do realize that they made an adjustment to that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was wondering who did the survey.
Well, me too, considering he voted 8 times to increase the national debt. I wouldn't have done first. They made an adjustment. He's now the 14th most conservative senator. So, you know, these things, and the fact that I've never been in politics is one of the reasons why you won't find a lot of data out there. If you went out and Googled Ken Cope on the web, what you'd find is a hodgepodge of stuff, nothing of about me. They've got my data mixed with someone else, their data mixed with me. But the bottom line is, I've never been arrested. There isn't a jail record out there on me. And, you know, I've lived my life clean up to this point. Am I a perfect guy? No. I've got the same things that all men do, you know, and you deal with those same things. But I know what my life is centers around. And as a Christian, I will tell you that I am very proud to say that I use the teachings of Jesus Christ every day as a yardstick about how I'm living my life. Do I succeed every day? No, but that's why I have faith, and I know that where I'm going. So I do not run from that. As a Christian, I will stand up and fight for Christian values and to restore those and what's written in the laws coming across our country. That is an important part of what and who we are in America.
I guess it would be an assumption on my part to even mention that you'll probably fight to be able to own those Christian values, as it seems in this country we're losing that right.
Well, and that's exactly why I bring up this 25 percentile number of Christians voting. We're losing that right because we're not getting the representation in Congress. And Christians are not exerting themselves the way they should and the way they're entitled to. Now, I'm going to make a bridge across to another topic, but I'm going to bring it back to this, and it's what's called the 503 IRS Elimination Plan. And you can see it on my web. The 5 it's a 5% national sales tax, which excludes the food and medicines because of the looks of it would be very difficult on poor, okay? And they'd end up paying more. The 0 is a 0% tax on small businesses that earn or have sales of $2 million or less annually. No tax. The 3 is a 3% tax on all companies that have more than $2 million of sales annually. Okay? When you look at the numbers of this, and what the purpose of this is to eliminate all the loopholes and all the gaming of the system. That means the elimination of 77,000 pages of government overreach and tax code that's smothering our country. And it's like shackles around your neck. And that's what we have today. What this plan does is it restores the right of individuals to have savings without penalty. There are no tax returns, period. There's no capital gains tax. There's no IRA requirements of qualified plans and unqualified plans. It allows the free economy basis of this country to flourish. If the poor are buying food and medicine and the necessity, they're not getting taxed. None of us would be. You wouldn't be taxed for that, and you're not poor. Well, you might be poor. I can't answer about your personal state.
State of mind.
You have a great hat on, so I'll
Okay,
tell you,
thank
you got good coverage. How's that?
I do.
So when we take a look at the what happens for the people is you've taken the shackles off of them. But now I'm going to bridge it back over to this Christian discussion we were having. By doing this plan, you also eliminate all 501c3 and C4 requirements, which means it allows the Christians in this country and churches to regain their freedom of speech and expression from the pulpit, which was always the case in our history. And when you see where that change has occurred is where we've started running into problems across this country because of the encroachment and all of a sudden the silencing of the Christians. And I was blessed to be in an event this past couple weeks with Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz's father. And of course, he's a pastor in a local church here. And he delivered a message that was one of the most informative that I think all of us should do well to listen to. And he addresses the fact that pastors are hiding behind the pulpit. And that's true, and it's because of this 501c3 and C4. So when I look at this plan, it looks like it's just throwing the IRS out. Well, it does take the enforcement wing of Obamacare, cuts it off right at the roots. So when you look at all these things, it's a far-reaching plan that says this makes sense. And you could also now tie the federal budget to the GDP without having a constitutional amendment. So I put a lot of thought in this. Being an accountant by background, I've got my undergraduate in accounting, my master's in corporate finance, and I like to tell people I've got my PhD in practical experience and common sense, and that's something you don't find in Washington. And that's why I've tried to apply to these plans. What makes good sense? So it's kind of a mix of several different plans, and it's a balance. And you'll hear people say, well, if you're going to go to a national sales tax, you have to be at 25%. That's what you're going to have to do as a national. Well, what they failed to take into consideration, economists will validate this, is that you have turns of your money going through the economy. So you have to take those turns out. You divide it by the turns. I'm at 5%, of which I dedicate 0.5% to doing nothing but paying down the national debt. And as the GDP grows, because this plan, it increases savings and capital, it brings back the money from overseas that the corporations are afraid to bring back because of the taxes, it lets it reestablish it into the capital base to recapitalize what we were talking about, the lost jobs and the lost industry base that we have. They're not penalized. They can bring it back and make good business decisions for good reasons. And it allows individuals the freedom that they need. And I'm not worried about it. I know how a profit and loss statement works. I've had P&L responsibilities for major programs. And when you understand how an income statement works, businesses are going to do just fine. And they'll do so much better when they know that they're paying 3% off the gross sales. So if Warren Buffett's going to go buy 5 Gulfstream 5s, he's going to pay taxes on it. And if a poor person is going to end up buying a big screen TV, they'll pay taxes on the durable goods piece of it. So it also means that the IRS today is so overreaching, it's become a political arm of the ruling party, which is absolutely in violation of everything that we have in our country. Okay, so it needs to be done away with for that reason alone. But when you take a look at what it is actually doing, is it's enforcing tax law on less than 50% of the people in this country. Because our party is the party of the working person. I know it comes off that we're a party of the rich and so on. We're not. We're the party of the working person. And I believe when you look at my website, copetexas.com, you'll see that it says that I'm a new breed of Republican. I've been a Republican for 42 years. I never left the party, but I sure feel like it's left me. And it's time for us to, let's talk about why that is. It's become so cozy with the establishment and with the big money. And at the same time, it's allowed itself to be alienated from minorities, from women, from poor, and from Tea Party. So it's done a great job of just screwing up its communication plan across this country. No reason we have a declining base in the Republican Party. We're not out doing things that need to bring people in. I believe that we should be doing things in our actions. 2 issues in this campaign and this election is Obamacare and jobs and the economy. Yep. Those are the issues. And when you understand that if we're focused on those and bringing jobs into communities, we ought to be delivering the message that says, come home to the Republican Party. We are the party of the working person. The key is to get people working. As long as they can make more staying at home, then they can't even work at a minimum wage job. Where's their incentive to come out and work? Of course, you have to have jobs for them too, and this president has done a wonderful job of killing jobs. He's doing exactly what he said he's going to do. He's transforming this country, and he's transforming it in the wrong direction. We should be transforming it back to capitalism, because that is what has been the savior. If you look back, Abraham Lincoln said that America will never be destroyed from the outside. Should we falter and lose our freedoms, it will only be because we have destroyed ourselves. You look back to when slavery was abolished. There wasn't a safety net of social programs for the blacks at that point that had newly gained freedoms to come out and go, well, the government's going to provide for me. No, they came into an environment of capitalism, pure capitalism, and they flourished. They had strong families. They had strong family values. They followed God. They did what they were wanting to do. They created a life for themselves. And that continued all the way up to about the mid-30s of this generation, this century, when all of a sudden we started getting the FDR techniques coming in and the policies. And now the Democrats, it's the Christmas Santa Claus approach that we're going to give them everything to everybody. And it has destroyed the fiber of the minority class, of the blacks in this particular case. It has just been destroyed. You look at what's happening with the single mother rates and deadbeat dads and guys going out and fathering 12 kids for 12 different women. The social fabric has been eroded, and it's directly because of the Democratic Party and the policies that they put in place. Those are things that we got to be making changes with in Washington. And you can't do it with a senator that's afraid to get out of a seat, that's just keeping it warm. And that's where I respect what Ted Cruz has done. He's had the willingness to stand up for principle, for what's right and wrong, and being able to voice that. And that's why I say it would be an honor. Can you imagine where Texas would be today if you had two senators that were working that way, and they were working together instead of working against each other?
That's a question I wanted to throw at you, too. Thank you for saying that. It prompted my memory. If the Texans truly embraced Ted Cruz, as we know they did, and they love what Ted Cruz is doing. I mean, you can go anywhere Ted Cruz shows up, and there is a huge following there for him.
Yes.
Why is it that John Cornyn doesn't want to run with Ted Cruz if Ted Cruz is being followed by all of us Texans? How did that happen?
Well, very interesting question, and I've been at a lot of the events, and I have yet to meet John Cornyn, never shaken his hand, never looked at him in his eye, but I do believe that he's afraid of people just like me, because he understands that he has lost the hearts and minds of Texans.
Who votes for him?
The uninformed voter, that's who does it.
They voted for Ted and they wanted him. Why would they vote for John Cornyn again?
Well, it goes back to all they're looking at the slick ads on TV and listening to the ones on the radio, and they believe it. Instead of vetting and going back and checking the record and establishing their own opinion based upon fact, they're letting other people develop who they're going to be voting for. So, and that's why I believe in this particular race that there's an opportunity for people like me, because I know the people I'm talking about are the ones that need to be fired up. You want to make a change in this race, that's where I'm talking about the 75% Christians. And this isn't just about Christians alone. I'd like to talk a little bit about immigration policy too. But when you start taking a look at bringing that 75% out, or 25% of it, it changes the whole dynamics of the race. And I'm talking about for March the 4th. Unfortunately, if they haven't registered by February the 3rd, they can't vote.
Yeah.
So you may have already hosed your opportunity to have any influence at all. And because of that, because you've been complacent and not involved in a process, you may very well have compromised what the future of this country could be looking like. So you've got to stay engaged and be involved in tea parties. And let me speak to the Tea Party aspect. Did you have a hard time lighting my fuse here this morning, Mel? I'm ready to go, you know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tea Party. What does Tea Party really stand for? And I love it when I go to a liberal paper and they start asking me these questions. Well, why do you align yourself with the Tea Party? Well, let me answer that question very simply. First, the first thing that their Tea Party is for smaller government. And I look them in the eyeball. What do you think about that? And you get a nod. Well, yeah, I kind of like smaller government. Okay. The second thing is fair taxes. You're believing fair taxes, right? Yeah, they kind of nod. I said, and we want to have the Constitution and our freedoms defended. Don't you about that? And so you get 3 nods real quick from a liberal reporter. Okay? And I said, okay, now that represents 95% of all the people that I have met at any Tea Party event across the state of Texas. And what has happened is you get a 2.5% on either fringe that are kind of right wing, they're a bit out there, you know, and that same dynamic works across the Republican Party or Democratic Party. You get people on the left and right in all of these parties. But what the Republicans have allowed happen is the Tea Party be labeled as a right wing, the nuts, the kooks. You get the Speaker of the House talking about the Tea Parties are all, the conservatives are damaging this country and they're labeled on it. But when they call me a right wing and a nut, that was one thing. But when they called me a Nazi, and I wear a pin that I wear on my proudly on my chest that reflects 27 years of service to the United States Army in defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I have these pinheads calling me a Nazi because I'm defending the right of fellow Americans who I call patriots, to stand up for the first time in their lives and take ownership and to exercise their right of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and this pinhead is going to call me a Nazi, that does get my blood boiling. And it's something for us to defend and make sure that we do not back away from it. And I am not one to back away from it. I'll address it nose to nose every single time. And so I'm just a little passionate about defending our rights of freedom of speech and so on. As a Tea Party, that's what we need to be doing. Mm-hmm. Now, I am disappointed in the Tea Party because it has no cohesion at all. We have a faction here and a faction there and another faction over there. They don't talk to each other. The Tea Party has lost its strength because it's not unified. It needs some level of unification so that when some hayseed like myself comes out of the locker and says, I'm running, that group ought to be able to vet me, and when they say that they're going to endorse me, it has meaning. Today, you get every little Tea Party endorsing somebody, and everybody, by the way, I think every candidate, to include John Cornyn, is claiming Tea Party sponsorship.
Well, that amazes me and confuses me.
Amen.
Because the IRS said we can't endorse anybody. Now, I always wonder when these laws
is
show
that because you're a 50C4?
Well, if we were.
Yeah,
but see they came after us on that too.
Oh, yeah.
So, I keep telling my elected, y'all need to make your minds up. You need to make your minds up. On one hand, you want us to support you and endorse you, but on the other, you say, well, you can't do that if you're a 501(c)(3). Now, listen, everything the Tea Parties get is through donations.
Yes.
Period. And you're sitting between two guys here that have fought time after time and again to unite the Tea Party.
Oh, yeah.
It's a difficult thing to do.
And just so you know, I was not aware of that before I set between
That's okay.
you. Okay.
That's okay. So, you need to know.
Just so the viewers out there know, we didn't set this one up at all.
No.
Believe me,
there's a bunch of them out there that want to unite the Tea Party, and then there's some that don't. I wonder sometimes if the ones that don't perhaps are really not Tea Parties. They just look like Tea Parties. And they're trying to keep us from coming together.
Well, that's why you have Democrats trying to run as Republicans today.
Absolutely, and that's another story I want to get into.
And there's a whole segment out there, but we need to do better. And I believe that the values of the Tea Party are honorable. And yes, we have people out on the fringes that we've got to make sure we listen to them, but they don't overshadow the influence of the whole. And that's what has been allowed to happen. But when I call myself a new breed of Republican, that's part of the message that I think we need to have, is that we are inclusive of the Tea Party. It is an integral part of what we do. That's who the citizens are. And we need to be bringing young people into the Tea Party. We're not doing very good at it. If I look around most of the Tea Parties, we're all graybeards.
Yeah, we are.
We're sitting around graybeards. Well, any organization that ever grows has got to be bringing the youth into it.
I'm not sure that it doesn't take that long to figure it out anymore.
Well, they say that most young people start out as liberals, and by the time they're 34, they're conservative. Yeah. That's because all of a sudden they started paying taxes and started understanding where's a third of my paycheck going.
Absolutely.
And they're entitled to ask those questions at that
sure
point.
They should.
So, but it takes them a little bit. But I think that we ought to have activities going on to be recruiting young people in Tea Party. If they understand the 3 fundamental principles I've just laid out, basically every young person would just that'd be great. And right now the problem we have with our generation is perception that we have screwed it up so bad, and we're pulling all the cream off the top of the milk jug that there's nothing left for the younger people coming up. They've lost hope, and that is not me. I am a candidate going forward for the United States Senate because I believe there is hope for our country. I believe that we ought to be taking the Constitution, instead of using it as a defensive board, to use it as an offensive board. And I've got some ideas that I'm probably best not to go into right here. But I've got some things I'll be glad to discuss with you privately and explain how to go do that. And I've had opportunities to talk to federal judges. Nice thing about running for the United States Senate, you get to meet everybody.
Yeah.
That's not important to me, but it's...
You get some ideas.
You get some ideas. So I've had a chance to talk to some people that should be in the know, and when I've laid out a couple of these things, they go, where'd you come up with that? And I said, I just read the Constitution, but I read it with a different view, flipped it around backwards, and went, well, wait a minute. Instead of it telling me what I can't do, what does it tell me I can do? And man, does it open up like a light bulb. So we have some things to do, and that's the type of thinking you need to have. So I think we're tired of career politician. We've got a career politician in there. That's all he's ever done, run from one office to the next, one office to the next, one office to the next. It's time to stop that and make a change.
If a man has to swear an oath to the Constitution, Ken, and raises his right hand to do so in front of a federal judge, well, why is it that he ignores it later? If it's so bad.
This is one of those stump the candidate questions that you have to be real careful of. I know where it's going. There's a lot of discussion today about what's constitutional and what's not constitutional being performed by people in office, and one person in particular in office. Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm addressing that we need to be looking at the Constitution in verse as opposed to the way it is. I've been asked a question as to, since I've sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, didn't say until I retired.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, to me, it still is in force with me, and it will be until the day I have an Army hat, and it's a retiree Army hat, but it has across the bill of it says "never retired," and that's really true. Once you're a veteran, you're always a veteran, and there's something about the ownership that we have of this country, and unfortunately, our younger people don't get a chance to experience that anymore today, and I think that is at our fault, and it's something that needs to be relooked at, because they need to understand what it is this country is all about. Or if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing.
That's right.
So, but going back to the premise of your question, yes, I've been asked about that. I've been asked that wonderful word about impeachment, and would I support impeachment? Under the right circumstances, yes, I would. But I would absolutely say, if you're not willing to do that as a senator, you should never be a senator. It should be something that is always in the playbook. Is it the right time? There's a lot of other situations we have to look at for the good of the country. Mm-hmm. It would not be good for the country today based on the facts that I've seen, but that doesn't mean we throw in the towel and we don't stand up and fight and push back, because that's exactly what I'm planning on doing.
Well, you answered the question very well. I really, even though we end up at impeachment at that point at some point in time in this discussion, I think where I was really going for maybe a dead end is if you have to swear to it mm-hmm. as an elected official, and by the way, every police officer across this nation and every sheriff's deputy across this nation has to swear to it. Mm-hmm. And we feel the same way about the Constitution as you do. Mel and I took it. Our friend in the audience took it. And it didn't end when we discharged.
No.
But the point of it is, if you have to swear to it, to be a judge, to be a president, to be a senator, to be a congressman, to be a state senator, whatever the case might be, why do it if you're not going to follow it? Why would you swear to it?
Well, the underlying motivation is wide open for question, and there's been a lot of people trying to investigate and understand what the ultimate goal is, and I think we have to be very careful with that as well, because over the next 3 years, we're going to start seeing some very dynamic changes. If the president is going to achieve what he has been looking for, which is the fundamental change of our government.
What does that mean?
Let's look back at the facts. I mean, we don't have to sit and guess. You can look at the facts and see what he's been doing with the expanding of the EPA, the Energy Department, the Homeland Security Defense. You can look at all those things, and any one of us as a military person would look at it strategically and say, it's painting a path, and we call them avenues of approach in combat. And when you start anticipating the avenues of approach and what you're going to do when they start coming into certain areas within certain trigger points, we're savvy enough to know that, and I'm just not articulating and saying point blank things because I'm not in a position to do that now.
Right.
I don't have all the facts. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I would be really looking forward to arriving in the Senate, is understanding and seeing those facts, because I believe that if things are being done that are unconstitutional, and I do believe there are, based on what I've seen so far, that the Senate is not neutered, and they should be exerting forces in ways that they have not exerted. And it would cause a constitutional crisis, most likely. But I think this country, it goes back to that statement I said, you either fight for this country today, or there will not be a country for your children and your grandchildren to fight for tomorrow. And I think it's incumbent upon us to stand up. The oaths that we've taken, we've just talked about as veterans, and we need to do the things necessary to defend and fight for this country. I'm not talking about all-out arms. I'm talking about using the system and using the system to fight for us.
Protect it.
Protect. Exactly.
And in such doing so, you continue the resolution that the Constitution is good for all people, period. And I ask people to read it every day.
Yeah.
And I ask them to read it, study it, and then mark out everything that they don't want for themselves or their children's or their children's children. If you don't want it for them, let's talk about it.
Well, and one of the hardest things about the Constitution is when you read it and you find something that you don't agree with. And you have to accept it because it's in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a good example. It's under freedom of speech, and it's under Article 1 of the Constitution. And someone starts burning the United States flag there in front of us. To me, that rips my heart out. I'd just soon, take him down for it. But when you stand up and you look, it says, do I stand for the Constitution or do I not? And that individual has the right of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, even though I don't like it. Of course, we heard about Phil Robinson not very long ago expressing his thoughts through freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And all of a sudden, the left-wing people just wanted to go nuts and vilify him because he's exercising his right. You have to accept things that you don't like as much as the things you do like, as long as it's within the Constitution. That's what makes us a fair country. When we start penetrating that and trying to make it only for us and what our thoughts are, it's kind of like freedom of religion. Freedom of religion is also freedom from religion. So we have to be very careful where you start mandating a religion when, in fact, we got to be standing up for the rights for those who don't care. We ought to be bringing people into our religions because they see us as the people they want to become.
To be most like.
To be most like. So we have to understand the Constitution, and I've had several people want to talk to me about church and state, and all of a sudden, I'm going, the office that you're asking me to come in here is to be fair and equitable for all Americans. Mm-hmm. And you have to be that way. It's freedom of religion. So
Well, there is one article that I would like to throw at you. That's not about tricking you in any way. And it's dear to my heart. Article 6 of the Constitution says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And when you read that and you look at the number of places in America today that Sharia law is attempting to establish itself in our courts and in our systems, you wonder where our real constitutionalists are that have served or are serving this nation right now, who swore to it. Go ahead.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and that is outside the bounds of the Constitution, and to me that is what we have to do to be defending the Constitution, not just protecting it at this point. That is not, Sharia law is not an acceptable.
Yeah.
It violates it. And when now keep in mind, you also have a couple other articles out there.
Sure.
When you look at 9 and 10, the amendments, the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution, you're talking about what the federal government has, or what is written in the Constitution is all of the powers that the federal government has. Anything that's not specifically written resides in the states or in the people. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, I think that's the crevice that they're trying so much to do with this Sharia law that you're talking about. Is saying, well, the Constitution doesn't say this over here, so therefore it's up to the people, and the people get to judge what they want, and the state. And I don't believe that that's the right interpretation. I'm with you in the
It's convenient for some people.
Yeah, and it's how they use the Constitution to manipulate and what they're saying. I am really focused on Article 2, Section 2, which is the advice and consent clause,
right.
Which I do not believe has been fully or properly interpreted. That there's elements of that afford the Senate a lot more authorities than what they've been taken today.
Well, that's a good question. Let me ask you this one then. If you feel that way about the advise and consent, what do you think about bringing the chickens home to roost in the states again and let the state legislature pick our senators?
Oh, you're talking about a constitutional convention. And I do believe you're talking about the 17th Amendment.
Oh, yeah.
Golly, isn't that amazing? Because, you'll find a lot of kindred spirits in the Mark Levin of the world and so on. And I have been reading the Constitution, and I believe that in 1913, when they must have been smoking or drinking something in 1913, because they put in place not only the 17th Amendment, but they put in the 16th Amendment, which is what started the IRS, and it started the Federal Reserve, which I call the private reserve, okay? And they came up with some of these ideas thinking that they were going to make the Constitution better, and I believe they've actually hurt our country. Couple quick points. Do you realize that in 1913, a dollar was worth 100 pennies? Today, that same dollar is worth 3 pennies. We've lost 97% of the value of the dollar because of the Federal Reserve.
And the IRS.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why I brought up my IRS plan.
And I was hoping that's where you'd take us, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Isn't it amazing that people of great wisdom at some point in time should have been expected to not have any evil thoughts about our money, right, and collecting taxes and so on and so forth.
Oh, I agree.
The root of all evil.
In the founders of the Constitution didn't see an IRS. They didn't see a Federal Reserve. And they did not see that all of a sudden they'd want to change how the senators were elected. So let's take a little step back in history. The founders of the Constitution developed it so that the House of Representatives is voted by the popular vote, by the citizens. That's the House of Representatives. And the President. The counterbalance of that is the United States Senate. The Senate was intended to be the representation of the states and to be a counterbalance to the federal power that was being taken, okay? So they never did look at this whole thing of term limits or that we had a government that was out of balance. So in 1913, when they came in and they put this in place, and all of a sudden the voting for the Senate became a popular vote, it's what has led to the corruption I call an electoral process that we have today, because it has allowed the big money now from outside of the state to influence what's happening inside of our state. that is the bad nature. I am a proponent. This is what you're asking me. Really, the question you're wanting to ask me is, do I support the 17th Amendment or not? I support repeal of the 17th Amendment.
Okay.
And I've had an opportunity to talk to the people that are running for the governorship of this state, and I've made it very vocal that in some type of control of what that senator's doing up there.
If he ain't doing the right thing, bring him home.
Exactly. If I can guarantee you that if the 17th Amendment had not been in place, you would not have Obamacare today.
Absolutely.
Obamacare would have been dead in its tracks because the states would have stopped it. And it's because of this very issue that the states were written out of it, and they are not in control of the federal. They are not a counterbalance to the federal government. So, where many of my opponents, everything's unconstitutional, everything needs to be returned back to state. I am in agreement that state rights have been absolutely trounced on and infringed on. I believe that the First Amendment, let's talk about the Constitutional Convention here for just a moment. Yeah. If we're going to have a Constitutional Convention, the First Amendment I'd put forward is let there be no law passed in the Senate or in the House that the President and the Congress representatives are excluded from having to participate in. In other words, it applies to them equally. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't do this Obamacare BS that they're doing today. That's the first one I'd do. Then I would take away the 17th Amendment, and I'd take away the 16th Amendment too. What I proposed in my 503 IRS elimination plan just bypasses it, because the likelihood of getting a constitutional convention in my first term as a United States Senator is probably not very high. It takes a long term, it takes many states to do that. It isn't a senatorial activity. It's the states that have to go do that. So, I'm trying to think of ways that doesn't require that, how to do it. So I stood up and I said, okay, I'm going to take a term limit, commitment to myself. I challenge every candidate to do the same thing. I challenge them to take that same challenge I did that says I'm not going to accept any money from PACs and lobbyists for 4.5 years. I'll give them 18 months prior to the next general election, which then puts it in the same, makes all candidates the same. I mean, because most candidates don't know until 18 months before whether they're going to run or not. But it equalizes the board. I challenge them to have the intestinal fortitude and the integrity to take that same challenge, because they're not going to do that, because they have different goals. We have people in this race that are not the incumbent and are not a sitting congressman that have aspirations of becoming a long-term politician. You can see it. Mm-hmm. That's not me. But that's what I'd be looking at from a constitution. So that's why I'm looking at the solutions I have at copetexas.com, is to understanding that the likelihood of getting a constitutional amendment through is not high. Americans and Texans can't wait that long for change. I'm signing up for that change effective the day that I get sworn in as United States Senator. And you can see what that is on my website, my contract.
I agree with you, and I applaud that. Now then, let's move to the 10th Amendment. And give me your idea as to why you think states are so reluctant to utilize the process of the 10th Amendment and nullification.
I think it's money. Again, they're so tied into the Federal Reserve and how the money flows through the income tax situation that it's, I've been asked, would I support Texas independence? As a United States Senator, I would have to say that's a state's decision. Okay, it's not a senatorial type decision. But if the situation is correct, under the right circumstances, yes, I would. Particularly when it becomes, if the federal government is not going to defend and support the Constitution of the United States, it's just violated its agreement with the states.
Yes.
And in so many ways, the federal government has violated it. And let's talk about immigration for a minute. Opposed to Austin, are we not, or under an invasion of immigrants coming across, illegal immigrants coming across our border? I believe we are. Mm-hmm. You got them packing everything from drugs to guns to everything you can imagine across that border. I believe that Texas has the right to go do that. Now, if you go look at the immigration bill that sits on President Obama's desk, and he is still the president, and I still call him the president out of reverence because that's what I was taught to do in the military, okay? I don't agree with his policies, and most of the things about the man I don't agree with, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still the president of the United States. But anyway, the president tells me I should like this bill that sits on his desk. It's 1,176 pages, and I have read every one of those pages, okay? And he tells me I should like it because John McCain has said, you should like this bill, okay? I can tell you that that is the biggest dog of a bill that I've ever read. And I've read a lot of other bills, even though I'm not in politics. I'm not a politician. I have read a lot of bills. And that one trounces on states' rights. It trounces on the Fourth Amendment's rights of the individual. And it is an absolute financial boondoggle, okay? So in that bill, from the states' rights, it removes the state's ability, which is given to it by the Constitution, to be able to use its National Guard in defending its border without having the approval of the Secretary of Homeland Security. Okay, so now the governor just abrogates his authorities under this bill, or what they're expecting. I believe it's unconstitutional for that reason alone. It allows the Secretary of Homeland Security within 100 miles of the border to waive the protection dollars to build this fence. So now, I'm going to bridge into what my plan is, because I think that's what's more important to the people. I believe that this particular issue of immigration to Texans and to all of those along the southern border is no longer a social issue. It isn't just the financial issue of the government's having to bear the weight of it. This is a national defense issue. And because of that, my first step is to build a fence 1,974 miles from coast to coast. And it will be, people ask, well, what's that fence look like? I have some ideas, but that's where I'd get some expert help from the Army Corps of Engineers, because they're the ones I'd tasked to do this. And they said, well, why the Army Corps of Engineers or the Seabees or the Seabees? Because it is a national defense issue, and it has to have a Texas sense of urgency. We can no longer allow this to continue. That fence can be built in 1 year's time frame. People say, 1 year? Are you crazy? I said, well, let's take a look a little bit in history. The Alcan Highway was 1,700 miles, and it bridges across Canada to Alaska. It took the Army Corps of Engineers was tasked to do that in 1942. It took them 8 months, and that was across permafrost, where if they let their bulldozer sit, it would sink out of sight. Okay, we're not having that. We now have new technologies and new equipment and stuff. 1,974 miles across a dry, arid desert arena, except for some geological structures that might make a little thing, is still achievable in 1 year. The cost for the Alcan Highway would have been about $2 billion under today's dollars. It was actually a factor of 14.29, if you want to know because I've gone back and looked at the facts on it, which means that a 1,974 mile fence would be about $3 billion. Not 8, and I'd do it in 1 year, okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little side note. As soon as that fence is built, where it's keeping people from crawling under it or crawling over it, you can reduce the administrative support required to keep that defended. You don't need to hire another 3,300 Border Patrol agents, which is what the current plan has to have hired over 5 years. And incarcerated in our prison systems over 250,000 illegal immigrants. And those immigrants are costing every single one of us. We're paying to feed them every day, to house them every day, to keep them secured every day. And oh yes, we're trying to rehabilitate them every day, okay? So as soon as that fence is up, they represent over 170 countries. I would have the single largest airlift, and we give that home country a choice. You take them in shackles, or tomorrow morning we'll do one more thing for you. For each one of those, we'll give them a canoe with no oars, and you'll find them on your own seashores, because they're not going to be welcome in the United States, and we're not going to have them. And we don't have to be paying for that bill. So that's step one. Step two is everyone has to be able to demonstrate the ability to speak and write in English and understand English, with the exception of very young and very poor. I mean, very old. I'm sorry. Very young and very old. Third is if an immigrant comes in and they go into the armed forces or a first responders type position, they serve for 2 years. Them, their spouse, their immediate children that are with them are American citizens. We bring them in American citizens. We used to do that years ago, and it worked very well for us. And the last group is, what do you do about the other 11 million? Say it's 11 million, it might be 12 or 13. Nobody really knows.
Or 20.
It's way more than that.
Or way more than that. We as a country have made a mistake. And that mistake is that we have not closed this border down beforehand. And I would dare say that each one of us here today, as we've raised our children, one of the lines that we've used is actions have consequences. Well, our inaction has a consequence. I believe that I would take each of those individuals, they go to the end, it's not amnesty, they go to the end of the immigration line. They have 6 months to come out of the shadows. This program would expire 6 months. After that, if they haven't gotten in line, they're subject to immediate deportation upon being found. But once they get to the end of the line, they're greeted by someone like us, and we have a card for them, and we say, congratulations, welcome to the United States. This is a provisional Social Security card. It's provisional because you have not gone through the immigration process, and until you go through that process, it will not be anything but a provisional card. But what it allows you to do is two things. First, you're going to start paying taxes day one. So while you're here and while you're going through this immigration process, you are paying taxes. Secondly, it allows you to draw those benefits that you've already been drawing, but now you're as a citizen. I believe that that is the assimilation that we're going to have to go through. I believe that it's a false argument to say we're going to deport 11, 12, or 20 million people. We have constitutional issues, and it gets back to our previous discussion about there are some things that we don't like that is in the Constitution, but it is. The 14th Amendment it has a section to it that says that if you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen. Yeah. So we have a situation where we have illegal immigrants that have parented a child born on American soil that is an American citizen today. So the resolution, if we don't go with a plan as I'm talking about, you have an undesirable situation where you're going to take a child and say, okay, I'm deporting the parents. What are you going to do with the child? You can't deport the child because the child's an American citizen, just same as you and I, same rights as you and I. Like it or not, that's the way it is. I don't think that's a viable solution. I don't think it's good for our country. I think that our country, we are big enough we can assimilate them in over time. I don't believe that they're taking any more jobs than they've already taken. I think that's a red herring of an argument, and we need to be over that. The perception is that our party is a heartless SOB, and we're just going to go deport everybody. And I don't believe that is true. I believe we are a party of family values, and we are a country of immigration. We've got to work through this. You have two extremes. You either deport all of them, or who do you not deport? It's trying to pick out of the pepper. And it's a very entangling alliance. So the plan I put together says that we could do this in 1 year. Put this chapter, there'll be a lot of them. It'll take a lot more than a year to be assimilated and go through the immigration process. Because if they provides the security that allows all those landowners on the southern border of our country the protection that they should be receiving today from the federal government, and they're not. So it reinstitutes the protection of all American citizens, is a significant financial decrease in what the budget requirements would be to be able to support that. Because once they're not coming across the border, the state's responsibilities are going to...
Let's revisit, if you will, the Obamacare Act, the Affordable Care Act. And you mentioned some of the issues that are contained within the act itself that may or may not, depending on how you look at them, I guess, really reflect upon medical care per se. They're kind of oddball topics that ended up in this care, and I would like for you to reflect upon those and say, why are these items contained in an Affordable Care Act, Health Care Act, when they don't really have anything to do with affordable health care? Isn't it strange that we would talk about the DHS and its authority within 100 miles of the border? So go ahead.
Well, I think it's because politicians wrote it, and it became a pork barrel type approach, particularly in a Democratic Party, when the whole logic was no one was going to read it. They were going to have to vote for it before they could find out what was in it. So It was their opportunity to stuff any little pet project or concept that they had at eroding the freedoms of our country. They knew that it would never pass through any of the documents, so they stuffed it in there. And one thing that they didn't stuff in there, which is of extreme merit for us to be discussing, is a severability clause. Severability clause, for those who are not familiar with it, requires that if you put that clause in there, that you can take any piece of that law apart and change it. If you do not put a severability clause in it, then you cannot sever anything out of that contract or out of that law. It is an all or nothing venture. So as it sits today, there is no severability clause, which means you cannot modify or change any element of that bill without modifying or eliminating the entire bill. It's an all or nothing arrangement. So in my position, that was part of the reason why they did exactly what you just talked about. They loaded all these things in it because they knew they couldn't take them apart. So that means there's only one choice for America, and that is to repeal Obamacare. There is no other choice, with some modification. If you look at my 503 IRS elimination bill, when you take away the IRS, you take away the enforcement wing of the Obamacare, because it's written directly in there, which means that because they have written the words the IRS into that bill, when you take away the IRS, you've just basically taken away the bill. So that is one element of it. But if I may, just before I give up on this, I am not in favor of just repealing and walking away. I believe that by the time we hit December of this year, we've all worked in major corporations and had group insurance covering our family and so on. Those of you that are out there right now in America that are listening to this, you need to understand that a recent survey showed that 70% of the CFOs in this country have said that by the end of this year, their countries will be walking away from any type of group health insurance plan for their employees, which means you're going to be forced out into these government exchanges, whether they exist or not. That's not going to matter to the CFOs. They're going to walk away from these programs. So at the end of this year, you're going to be sitting there with you and your family with no insurance. And if you have those things like approach us on occasion, like prostate cancer or breast cancer, or have to have a heart valve replacement, come December, actually January of next year, you're going to have to ask, where am I going to get this care? Because the cost of it, you're not going to be able to, it would have wiped out your entire, everything that you've got today, from your home to your car, you leverage everything you have, and when you get done with that operation, you're wondering, where am I going to live? So why'd I go to get the operation? Which is why the Obamacare is fundamentally changing this country. So you're going to ask yourself, where am I going to go? So you're going to pick up the phone, you're going to call a brand new senator that you're going to have sitting in Washington, D.C. You're going to go, you know, I don't have any insurance. That brand new senator, if you're talking about my opponents, are going to say, well, you know what? We just did what you asked us to do. We repealed Obamacare. We repealed it. Okay, but now where am I supposed to go to get help? They're going to tell you, well, why don't you call 1-800-AUSTIN, Texas? Why 1-800-AUSTIN? Because it's a state problem now. It's not mine. Mine was not about solution. Mine was about eliminating Obamacare. We did that. Great. Okay. I don't believe that's the right thing to do. I believe that's an ostrich approach to the problem. I have put forward, and already it's out in press. Check at copetexas.com. You can look at my news. And when I released it, and I said, if I'm elected to be your United States Senator in January of 2015, by July of 2015, I have to have 6 months to be able to work and do my job, okay? I will have a plan in front of Congress that will offer a solution to Obamacare, and it will be based upon a very successful entity called automobile insurance. That's where the model would be. And what the federal government has to do, so you just having the federal government stand out of it completely, they can't. They have to take the shackles off the insurance service providers to allow them to go across boundaries of states, and allows the people that have those plans to port them between jobs. Those are federal type requirements that need to be done. That's where the federal involvement stops. This is not a federally subsidized program. It is absolutely free market based. Because if you look at the automobile insurance, you have a multitude of service providers. You can go out there and Google automobile service provider, insurance providers, and you get a list of everybody names you won't even recognize, okay? So you can see them out there. That same type of thing would develop in the health insurance side very, very quickly. And they would be resilient and be willing to stand up and do that. The other piece of that is they develop the plans that have comprehensive insurance, and you can get all your different deductibles and so on. And then the next piece of it is that as a consumer, you get to develop what it is you want to buy. So you have the choice of developing what fits your budget. I believe the resilience would allow them to do this in very short order. It takes away the ostrich approach. It says we have to be adults. We have to solve the problem for that 100 million plus people. What are they going to do? We can't just leave them in a hole and go, it's going to take us another 3 years to develop a new plan. So copetexas.com, you can check out that plan as well. And I appreciate you taking a look at those solutions.
All right. Well, Ken, thank you so much for coming to our studios and giving us a little bit of insight to how you see your world.
Well, I thank you very much. I originally planned on 15 minutes, and I love having an opportunity of going along here.
Yeah, and I told your scheduler, I said, well, you know, these things always have a life of their own.
Yeah, they do.
And that's generally what happens. Because put stuff up on a dartboard and throw at it. That's how many problems we have.
Well, I appreciate you poking me all the time to keep talking. You really had to do a lot of poking here, didn't you? But I appreciate everybody's listening to me. I just ask that you get involved. Go get your friends to vote. Go vote. This is your election to win or lose. I've done everything I can. I need your help. I'll even ask for some money to help cover this campaign. Right now, I'm doing it all on my own. On copetexas.com. If you want to put in a few coins to help, it's cost me about $25 to run an ad across the state for a time. So every one of those is added exposure, and I'd welcome any help I could get, and it won't go to waste, I'll guarantee you. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're a friendly group of people, and I'm sure we've worked together in the past, but I'd love to come back anytime. You have a hot subject you want to talk about, I'll be here.
Good. Let me set one up. The next time we get together, folks, we're going to ask the question, which is begged by all of this information: why in the world did we bother to destroy the healthcare industry in this country? Tell me again, why did we do that? Oh, I see. I think I've got it. Okay.
Can I stay for the next segment?
Save it for the next segment.
Yeah. That's
we don't have
there's
time.
an answer to that question, but we'll wait till the next time.
All right.
And you guys, hey, thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and sign off for this afternoon. And I think we've got Rick. Do we have another candidate coming in this afternoon? Not a Senate candidate.
We got one coming in this afternoon at 4:30. Thereabout. It's a local race for justice of the peace. We hope you'll join us. It will be entertaining.
That's right. Thank you, Ken. And everybody out there, have a great day. We'll catch you Friday, Chaos Radio, 10 a.m. as our usual time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Happy trails.